Do you have the desire and calling inside to do more and be more, but you feel lost, confused, and angry about where to start, how to even start at all? Well, I know that feeling because I've been in the exact same position. And so today, I want to share with you how I overcame those challenges to have more clarity, focus, and purpose in my life. Now, I just want to share something really quickly. If you want to overcome your fears, procrastinations, and self-doubt to live a life of purpose, go ahead and download my free Rule of 3 intro guide for high achievers who want to be more and do more, but you just don't know where to start. And then if you're also just tired of waiting and want to take action today, and you want to also take things to the next level, just go ahead and click that same link down below. It'll send you over to the page, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can apply for online coaching. And I look forward to meeting all of you. So the real answer before you even get started on pursuing anything outward is going to have to be dealing with the inside, the inward battle. Now I'm going to break it down for you in a way that I broke it down for myself, and it's done wonders for me and also for the clients that I work with. So let's get started with the very first thing you have to understand. There are, generally speaking, 3 things you want to have in good alignment with each other. And those 3 things are your story, your emotions, and the shadow self. These 3 have to be in good alignment, because when they're in healthy alignment, you'll find yourself just making so much ground with making the same amount of effort, and sometimes you might even feel it's easy. That, again, that doesn't make the challenges go away. That just makes you more capable of managing and handling them. So starting off with the very first thing is story. Understand that you are made up of stories. Stories that you've told yourself, stories that you've adopted from other people, and stories are made up of 2 things. You have your thoughts and you have your emotions. Let's start with thoughts. So thoughts are pretty self-explanatory, and some people actually think in images, some people think in words. And then if I were to give an example of it, would be, let's say I want to give a presentation. You know, I have a PowerPoint presentation I got to give at work or at school or whatever scenario it is. And what you find that happens is, if let's say this is let's say it's not serving you in the best way, this particular story. The thought can be of you messing up. The thought can be of you embarrassing yourself, forgetting what you're supposed to say, or maybe people just aren't that impressed with your presentation and you feel like a massive letdown. And so you have those thoughts that ruminate. Those thoughts can create emotions that connect with with the thoughts. Those emotions can be anything. Could be anxiety, could be paranoia, could be anger, could be frustration. Those things in combination become your story. Those become stories. Now, it also works the other way around, right? You'll have emotions that can spring up before the presentation. Maybe you don't really do much thinking that way. You're more of just an emotion-based individual. So you're going to feel anxiety, you're going to feel stress, you're going to feel all these overwhelming emotions that can then lead to thoughts. And then when you combine those things together, they create stories. And we're made up of a bunch of stories. And these stories control everything you do. They control what you see, they control the way you react to things, they can control your actions. And sometimes, if it's a story so deeply ingrained in you, it becomes autopilot and you don't even know it's happening. Let's quickly put a pin on this for a second and move on to the next thing. It all makes sense at the end. So your basic emotions are going to be happy, sad, angry, fear, and disgust. Now, understanding your relationship with these emotions are going to be absolutely critical in having all these 3 things come in alignment. Now, what are the main, what's the main type of relationship people have with emotions? They usually have emotions in this general way, which is you have good emotions that I would prefer to feel all the time, and then you have bad emotions that I just don't want to feel anymore, I want to push away. And to put it on the board, you can look at it as, obviously, everybody wants to be happy all the time. I want to be happy just 24/7 all day long every day. I would rather not feel so sad unless it's being sad because I'm watching, like a happy sad. I'm watching a puppy fall over and kind of hurt himself, but he's okay. Or watching like a war veteran pick up his kid after being deployed for how many months or years or something. So, but generally speaking, people don't want to feel sad. People generally don't want to feel angry. They usually say, oh, when I feel angry, it's terrible. Fear, oh, that's a terrible one. Disgust, oh, that's a terrible one. And what we notice, we don't really even know we're doing it, but we end up pretty much just ignoring and suppressing all these other aspects of our emotions that are critical. They're critical for everything to work in balance and harmony. And so a way that I describe it to my clients is you want to look at emotions as signals. They are signaling information to you, and you have to receive that information, because if you do not receive that information, it doesn't mean it's going to go away. It doesn't go away. Maybe it's not in your conscious mind, but it's going to be sitting in the subconscious, and it's going to cause disturbances until you pay attention to them. And so the way you look at it, oops, almost bumped it. The way you look at it is, I call the council of emotions. If you imagine yourself a mayor, you're the mayor of a town. That town is going to be your brain, your mind. And you have on your cabinet all these emotions that each represent a character. If you were to imagine when you're operating and running this city, you would have each emotion suggest something to you when it's the appropriate time. So for example, obviously, if you went to a zoo, fear would say, well, let's make sure we don't get too close to the edge of the lion enclosure, otherwise you might fall in and die. Well, that's a pretty appropriate thing for fear to point out to you and signal to you, so therefore you keep your distance from the rails, or maybe you're just extra vigilant and mindful about it. Same thing with disgust. If you're going out into the woods, disgust would tell you, well, that thing looks off, looks grimy, looks gross, don't eat it, because if you eat it, you can get sick or you can, worse, die. And so each one has an appropriate signal it's trying to tell you. Now, this is where it gets tricky, which then leads me into the third, the shadow. The shadow is essentially the bottom layer beneath a particular emotion you're deeming as bad, that you're wanting to ignore. And the shadow self essentially is parts of you that are old stories, deeply ingrained stories, that are either traumatic to you, so something happened that caused you a lot of distress, abandonment, resentment, you felt a strong sense of unworthiness, lack of control. Something happened in the story that led to particular emotions being suppressed and ignored, condemned bad in some ways, right? Like some days, and you wonder, I had a client actually I just spoke to, we got off a call an hour ago, and he was saying that disgust was a common emotion for him, that he always felt like he was disgusted at himself. But at the same time, he wouldn't feel disgust with other things. If you saw vomit on the ground, you had to clean it, or pick up crap off the floor. He doesn't feel anything bad about it. But when it came to himself, he felt disgust. And that disgust led into some shadow work that we had to do, where we had to uncover old stories that he was not really paying attention to, that ran on autopilot, that affected the way he perceived everything. This is by far the hardest part, because it's obviously things you don't want to bring up to the surface. They bring up heavy emotion. They bring up just intense suppressed energy that you've been trying to push down below the surface, but you find it to be uncontrollable. And so what is it that you do? So how do we get all these things in alignment? Well, the first thing you have to understand is that, or build awareness towards, is that you are made up of stories. Stories that you've told yourself, stories that you've adopted from other people. Stories are the combinations of your thoughts and emotions. But at a next level, your emotions, the main ones, again, happy, sad, angry, fear, disgust, are signaling to you information. And there are some that, based on modern, rhetoric, will deem this to be the greatest one. That's the only one you have to feel. It's the only one you should feel, which is wrong. That's not how it works. You have to have a balanced approach, and having more stable, healthy levels of emotion rather than trying to imbalance yourself with one. But anyways, they signal information to you that they're trying to get you to figure out and fix. And then a layer below that is the shadow self. The stories that have been pushed back in the corner, in the dark part of that attic, so that you don't deal with and you don't bring up. The magic to it is this is dealt with and acknowledged what will start to happen is you will start to feel a more balanced sense. You can start to practice having more range of emotion and not seeing them as enemies or signs of your weakness, but rather seeing them as allies to you, because that's what they are. They're there to help you. And then from there, you can start to recognize which stories that you can change, the stories that you can adjust, because I'll tell you, stories are not permanent. You can adjust, you can change them, which is why I am a big believer in the balance of practical advice, practical psychology that's going to allow you to actually change your stories, change your mindset, change your frame, be able to move towards your vision with actual steps and efficiency plans. But then without any of this, you're going to find you're on an uphill battle. It's just not going to work out. So then on a final note, I'm just going to quickly touch on some shadow work and how you could do that, just to give you the bare bones. So the first thing you have to understand is that you have to explore this side of you with curiosity and adventure. Curiosity and adventure is the same childlike emotion that made you go outside and play in the mud, play with sticks, and just not really think too much about it and just have a great time. But now, as you get older, things start to change, but then you have to also remember that you have to apply this with no judgment. The minute you apply judgment towards a part of yourself, what starts to happen, it'll like slip away, it'll scurry off, it hides again, and then you just can't deal with it anymore in that moment, so you have to try again later. So if you approach it with curiosity and adventure, childlike wonder and state, with no judgment, that's going to be the best combination. At first, I would recommend you try doing this alone, do it in private, because in order for you to bring someone else into this, they have to sort of understand how to tackle the situation. Otherwise, they're going to go into, and it's not a bad thing, people try to help, but they jump into a savior mode, like they try to help you and fix you, right? And then you don't really need that. You need someone to explore and let you figure it out yourself, because that's how you're going to do it. So again, once we get this in order, what's the next step? And then the next step is reflecting as far back as we can on old stories that we've pushed to the corner, pushed to the side. So old stories. Those old stories can be, why do you always feel unworthy? There's always this sense of unworthiness that no matter how much you try, how much you go for things, it's just not enough. You're not feeling satiated with it. You always just feel empty. That's just one example. And so you have to look at your story. What's the common story you've told yourself for your whole life? And then look back at much as you can as the origin of that story. Where did it start? Where did it begin? Oftentimes the first thing that you hit is probably not what it is, the first memory. Usually it's, a couple layers down. It's not always at the very surface, because again, we've pushed it so far back, it's on autopilot. So be patient. But that's the first thing. Find and dig down into the old stories. Once you find it, now comes the real game. You have to sit and engage with that story, engage with the emotions. And so in other words, you can't try to fix or hide it or run away from it. You quite literally just have to sit with that uncomfortable emotion. Sit with it, breathe into it, allow that wave of emotion to come and go. It's going to kind of run through its course, but it has to. Now, the third stage is going to kind of break into two pieces, because you're going to have an old memory of you possibly as a child, and then you're going to have the part of you that is of today when you're older. And so there's going to be a separation in that memory. So the first thing you want to think about doing is just reflect and immerse yourself in the story of you at that age. So you when you were younger. Once you immerse yourself in that moment, what does it feel like? What is happening? What are your emotions? What's the environment around you? And you can sit in that for a little bit. Once you sit in that, then comes the second part. And the second part is you of today, hopping back into that moment, observing yourself when you were younger, and then what is it that you would want that child to hear? What do you want that younger self to hear from you or from somebody else? What would they want? Oftentimes you get fragmentation, you split through bad events and bad stories that have happened to you, you split into two people. The side of the old story of you and the new you. And there's always that constant battle. So you have to integrate them, bring them together. And then part of that is understanding the message. And the message is that the very thing that has brought you pain and misery was also simultaneously the exact same thing that has brought upon you a strength. The individual that I worked with today, his issues of unworthiness, not being good enough, caused him distress and pain. But it was also the same pain that allowed him to lose 50 plus pounds of weight. It allowed him to now have an acute sense for other people who are in similar boats as him. And he can spot it from a mile away. You can't hide. He will spot it and see, and you can't hide it. There's no way. And he gets overwhelmed with the emotion to give that individual a moment of his time. He can't help himself. That's just something he has. And that came from that pain. And so understanding the two, understanding that there is a harmony and the beauty in those two emotions, those two things, and not deeming it as wrong and bad that you have to push aside and then only lead with this angle of you that's strong and powerful. The real power comes in that integration. Once you integrate it, you can genuinely let it go. We often confuse letting go with suppression. Pushing it to the side, looking away from it, that's letting go. It's like, that's not letting it go. You're still carrying it. Letting go is acknowledging it. Letting go is accepting the emotion that comes with it. And then ending everything off with looking at what it also brought for you. It's brought things in your life. And it'll bring you a sense of humility. And then once you have that, now you can focus a lot more on the strength it gave you without having it control you. I hope this helped you a lot. And if you're wanting information on the Rule of Three method to bring clarity, focus, purpose back in your life as someone who knows that they can be more and do more, click that link below, download that free intro guide. And then if you want to take yourself to the next level and you want to work with me personally, scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page and fill out the application form for online coaching. I review all the applications and I get back to you with available dates, and I look forward to working with you guys.